You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Head of the G team in studio with us, Gordon McKernan. Good to have you back as always. Thank you for the time. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm doing great.
Man, you're always on the go.
Yeah.
So whenever we can get you in studio for a couple of segments, I'm always happy to do that. I know it's been a couple of years now that you've been like cannonball into the deep end of the NIL stuff. Have you taken a step back and sort of taken a breath and assessed all that's happening? Because I remember the first conversation you and I had, you're like, I always like to try new things, and then boom, a year, and you're like, I didn't think I was going to spend that much of my budget on NIL, and now like you're full on in the deep end, man. There's no getting out of this thing.
It's in my law practice or in business life or NIL, things are still full speed ahead. I just walked out. I formed another law firm in the last 6-9 months. I don't know if you knew about that.
I hadn't heard. Yeah, nobody's told me.
Yeah, it's called Bonacaz McKernan, and Dawn Bonacaz has been a longtime attorney of mine who has done all of my transactional work.
Okay.
And she came to me and said, "Look, I'd like to do this with you. Would you support it? Would you partner with me?" So I said yes. And so I was literally sitting in a meeting, and I'm without an executive assistant right now, and my schedule is all awash. I mean, I was supposed to be here at 5 today with you, right? Had to move it to 4 because I forgot I'm supposed to be going out to practice after this to LSU, and so I'm just in flux. But in any event, I'm in a meeting going over marketing strategies for this new firm, and I'm texting Taylor. I'm going, what time am I supposed to be there? And he said 4. I said, no, but I'm not going on at 4. That's like, get there at 4, going at 4:20. He's like, no, you're going at 4.
No, you're on at 4.
I literally had to walk out the meeting and come. So, yeah, so life is still full throttle ahead for me. That's the way I like it. I like a lot of energy and like new challenges. And so everything I've been doing, I'm continuing to do, but adding some new challenges as well. The pickleball deal you probably are aware of over there on Burbank, and that's full throttle ahead. It's just over budget and taking longer than we thought, right? So,
like many things in life, I guess. Many new projects.
Yeah, so we've got that. So things great. I'm blessed.
When did Amazon or maybe Shaq's people, the production company, when did they reach out to you about being a part of the NIL documentary?
Yeah. I'd have to go back and see, but I wasn't approached first because they came to me several months after they were into it. LSU kind of reached out to me and said, like, we want you to consider something. And they had already signed the deal with Amazon, right? And Amazon paid them, the school money to do it. And they had already had their prime figures kind of selected, right? Livy and Flage and Aaliyah and Angel, they had, and Jaden, had their main characters they had already had. And it's my understanding they'd already been here interviewing and filming, because when they approached me, they basically said, here's our idea, here's our concept, we think it'll be great. And we've been in talks and dealing with all these people and doing interviews and following them around. And it became apparent to us that you were a central figure in all these people, right? Didn't do anything with Livy. We talked some, but represented, did a deal with Jaden, did a deal with Flage, did a deal with Angel, did a deal with Aaliyah. I mean, so I was kind of all in that. And they said, and then you're somewhat noticeable in town, right? Everywhere we go, we see your board or something. So we were like, they were like, we think that you need to be a part of the story, right? From your vantage point, born and raised here in Baton Rouge, love LSU, how you got involved, what it meant, and those things. So that was probably last Christmas, somewhere in there, in the fall, winter.
Okay.
And then from there, did some negotiations, had to have attorneys look at what we can do and what we can't do, and all that type of stuff. And then they started doing some filming and following me and my team and watching us interact with the players. And that went on probably 3 or 4 times. They came down for big filmings.
I became aware of them at the Heisman because the crew, they were following, we were there covering the Heisman, they were following Jaden around, and I know I've told the story before, but after he won it, there was the post-Heisman party, and like Cody Worsham was being interviewed in a hallway. Yeah. Were you there?
No, I wasn't there.
And I like had to stand there for about 10 minutes and wait for him to finish this interview before I could walk down the hallway. But and that's when he explained to me what it was. But the interesting thing about it, if you haven't watched it yet, and I think maybe 5 episodes have come out so far.
Yep, that's right.
I've seen the first one.
Right.
Literally, the opening sequence is you are narrating literally the opening sequence of the entire thing, which is pretty powerful as well to speak to what you've been in.
Yeah, and that wasn't, they didn't give me a script ever. This was just all off the cuff. They ask you questions and they interview and you talk. And Alex pointed that out, my marketing director the other day. He said, "Did you realize that this whole opening thing is your voice?" And I went, "Wow, I sounded somewhat intelligent. That's good." They decided to use me to frame the story, right? So that was pretty good.
It worked really well.
Yeah.
I'm curious where you think, and we got Gordon for 2 segments. I do want to ask him what happened today with Tennessee and Georgia. We'll get some thoughts on that. I'm curious where you think LSU is in the NIL landscape here on what's today, September the 17th. And you've been very transparent too. Is you've had a lot of conversations with other collectives in NIL, a lot of free flowing and sharing of information. Where is LSU today?
Yeah, I think we're in a good position, right? Are we in the best position? No. But I think relative to the other schools, we're in a good position. The donor base is still there and still attached to the program, so to speak, and wants to support it. And they've got a couple of guys who are really stepping up, and that's great to see. We're very creative in how we're doing things, I think, as a school. I think Coach Kelly is mindful of the salary cap. I hate to call it a salary cap now in a sense, but it is. Every school has a certain amount of dollars that they can dole out across all their sports, men and women, and you have to be aware of that. So he has a general idea between the school and sports properties and donors what he can spend, and I think he's trying to do it the best he can. And we've lost a few players because we're not just going to throw money at them, but I think he wants to build a place that you want to come here first and be part of this LSU experience. And then, by the way, you can make some good money here too as well. So I do think that we're in a really good place, but I think you're starting to see the separation. I watched Texas this weekend, and they're looking much like we did 4 or 5 years ago in terms of the talent. You watch the speed, the size on the field, and that's directly due to the amount of money. They're just outspending everybody to get some of these athletes, right? And I think that'll be addressed some point in due time if you have the rich schools really getting richer in terms of signing the better players. It's going to leave a lot of people out with some very important congressmen and senators in different states who probably want to take a look at it, right? I mean, how does Alabama historically compete with Texas when they're going to go to the oil money?
Do you think that's interesting because for as long as we've had the NIL conversation and for as long as the NCAA, for example, has asked Congress to intervene, Congress forever, has just said, not interested.
Right.
Do you think there's a point where they do?
Without a doubt. I do. I do think so. And I'd heard from different relationships I have out of D.C. that it wouldn't happen this year because of the election year, right? But it's certainly going to in due time. And I think due time is sooner rather than later, especially if you get Texas on a couple-year run of some national championships and just reloading, right, just differently than everybody else could do. I think you're going to have some senators in other states who've long been a part of the experience of an Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State and can't compete with some of these oil schools and some other schools.
It's interesting because there has never been parity in college football, G. No. I mean, it's the haves and the have-nots. Right. It's just what defines the haves and the have-nots now is different than what it has been in the past.
Right. Yeah.
So I'll be fascinated. I am fascinated by the whole conversation. And maybe I'll just come from a standpoint where as an admitted LSU guy, I'm an alum as you are. I mean, but I want to see LSU do well and everything. I know you have an advantage in the dirt, with the amount of talent in this state. LSU, even though LSU's never going to outspend Texas,
right?
There's going to be kids that grow up here that'll give their arm, like Will Campbell, give his arm just to wear the purple and gold.
That's right.
So there's always going to be sort of that component.
Right. We don't have to spend as much. We don't. And that edge rusher that we lost out of Dallas last year is playing for Texas and is making a big impact. Yeah. I think he really in his heart wanted to come here. And he loved the experience and what we had to offer him, right? But they just put so much money on him, we couldn't compete. At the end of the day, they washed him in that.
Are you comfortable saying what financial range we're talking for some of these types of players?
Yeah. I mean, I can give you a range, but these guys that we're talking about, it's from $750,000 to $1.5 million. That's yearly.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, and I've been very comfortable with my source of this information. Dominic Williams, the defensive lineman from TCU, that LSU was recruiting, I am very confident in saying this number, that his ask was $1.2 million, and LSU was certainly not going to pay him that. I do not know what Oklahoma gave him.
Right.
I don't know if it was 1.2, but I know that was his ask. And it was like, well,
who was the receiver, the number one we lost to Texas or initially, and then
DeCorian Moore, who's now at Oregon.
A friend of mine over at Texas told me, we got him from you guys. We put a good package together, and then he said, well, I need to talk to Oregon, and they heard that he had committed to Oregon, and they upped their offer substantially, and we're over 7 figures, and he never gave him a counter. He didn't call him back and say, all right, well, let me see. I'll take that to them and see. So that shows you the depths of, and you hear it that Phil Knight really wants a championship before he dies. That's kind of what's coming back to me from my Texas friends is that, if the Nike billionaire decides to unleash it, it's going to be tough. And apparently that might be happening out there. But for the number one receiver to go to Texas and say, well, let me just go talk to Oregon, and then go, oh, by the way, it doesn't matter. Don't even bother countering.
Yeah, that oil money ain't sneaker money.
No, that's right.
Apparently not. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.